All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces, riding early for their daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. The tears are filling up their glasses, no expression, no expression. Hide my head, I want to drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. Dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Children waiting for the day they feel good. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Made to feel the way that every child should. Sit and listen, sit and listen. I went to school and I was very nervous. No one knew me, no one knew me. Hello teacher, tell me what's my lesson. Look right through me, look right through me. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. Dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you and I find it hard to take. When people run circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Mad world. Mad world. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you and I find it hard to take. When people run circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Enlarging your world. Mad world.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Jacob Nurek. I'm the Assistant Director of Adult Programming at the Brompton Center for Jewish Life. Tonight marks our December entry of our Jewish Book Talk series and our penultimate event of 2024. And it just so happens this is the last event in the Warburg Lounge before the renovations kick in and we don't see it for quite a little while. If you like what you see and hear tonight, you can find out more on our website, 92ny.org, and our Instagram page, 92nd Street Y. We are very happy to have Shira Dicker, writer-at-large, activist, and publicist who's captivated by contemporary culture. She has been the U.S. correspondent for the Media Line since August of 2024. The Media Line is a wire service covering news pertinent to the Middle East. Thank you as well to Judah Goldman, for performing tonight. Your mother must be so proud. Judah is a singer-songwriter extraordinaire, as well as part of the Romemu prayer and song ensemble, the Romemu ensemble. Thank you. And we also have tonight, as always, Rabbi David Ingber, the Senior Director of the Brompton Center for Jewish Life, and the rabbi and founder of the Romemu community of the Upper West Side. Tonight we will be discussing Lolita at Leonard's of Great Neck and other stories from the before times. I want to thank you all for coming, and I look forward to seeing what we discuss.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Judah. That's beautiful, right? Unbelievable. I think not just your mother is proud of you, your father and everybody here. It's perfect to begin with that song, and of course it was chosen because we were living in a very crazy-making time, and I think for the Jewish people for the last year, I think many of the people that I walk in, whose circles I walk in, and circles that you walk into, Shira, are reminded of the well-known story of Rav Nachman of Breslev, who is the great-grandson of the founder of the Hasidic movement, who famously told a story about tainted wheat, and said that once there was a kingdom where the advisors to the king came to him and said, "Your Majesty, this year's entire wheat crop has become tainted, and anyone who eats of it goes insane. But don't worry, Your Majesty, we've placed separate wheat on the side for you and for you alone, so that you won't be tainted." And the king said, "No, of course I have to eat the wheat. I have to be with my people." And they said, "No, but Your Majesty, then you too will go insane." He said, "Well, this is what we'll do. We'll each place a dot on our forehead," he said. "And that when we look at one another, even though we've eaten the wheat, we'll remember that we've lost our sanity. And in that way, we'll be sane in a mad world." And so it's kind of like, I think a lot of us are having conversations over the last year where we're looking at one another and saying, are we, it's a mad world. And we've found community in these spaces. And I think that when I've spoken to you about this book and particularly about the story that will be the focus of this evening's conversation, The Jerusalem Lover, it's really a conversation about a prescience, or a kind of almost prophetic, as you'll speak to, almost a premonition or deep intuition that you were having and seeing, writing on the wall, that foretold of a time when things would be extremely confusing, and maybe we needed guidance, and I think your story does that. And so just want to thank you for being here for the last talk in the current iteration of the Warburg Center, and to bring some sanity and some insight into a very troubling moment also for us as Jews, and also for us as a community. And so I know that you wanted to read. You can take it away. You can read. Bring us into your story and bring it into your writing.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi David. Thank you, Judah. Thank you, everybody, for trudging out in this creepy weather and in this creepy time, this very mad, creepy time. So just to reiterate, I'll just show you the beautiful cover. This is my collection of short stories, which is on sale over there. And I do want to point out that it makes a great Hanukkah gift for many members of your family and friends. The last story of this collection stands alone. These are 5 novella-length stories, all featuring strong Jewish female protagonists. And I have to say, The Jerusalem Lover, in my mind, was the unremarkable story as this was going to publication, which was early in 2023. I worried about some of the other stories because they had very edgy topics. And if some of you have read the stories, you know what I mean. I did not realize, and my publisher called me first and brought it to my attention, that The Jerusalem Lover, as Rabbi David just said, is prescient, nearly prophetic. So what is the story about? The story is about a professor at Columbia University who becomes a conspiracy nut after September 11th, believes that it was an inside job of the United States, then believes it was with collusion from Israel, and then he starts to go down the rabbit hole of anti-Zionism and then rank anti-Semitism. All right, did I have a crystal ball in my Morningside Heights apartment overlooking Columbia University? No, but we're going to talk over the course of this evening about the spark for this story, because there were a few sparks and there was one primary spark for the character, but I'll just do a reading to set the tone. It is an impressionistic story. The story is told through a variety of characters. The professor in question is Elisha Rosenzweig. He is an Israeli professor. He was a Hungarian child refugee, went to Israel, professor of Hebrew at Columbia. Unremarkable but successful career, meaning successful but unremarkable in terms of controversy until September 11th and the aftermath. The story, it is never explicitly stated, but the story takes place in 2005. And some of you may remember that July 7th of 2005 were the terrorist attacks in London, mostly on the Underground, but also involving one of the buses in Russell Square. Major terrorist attack, radical Islamic terrorists were responsible. And this story leads up to that event. Okay, so glasses. I'm going to introduce you to Rachel. Rachel is the wife of Elisha Rosenzweig. Exactly 4 months earlier, Rachel Rosenzweig walked through the tastefully ornate abode belonging to Martin Holloway, the president of Columbia University, flanked by 2 faculty wives whose names she was forever confusing or simply forgetting. The one to her left, married to the famous astronomer, was it Doris or Barbara? And the one to her right, married to the chair of the history department, was it Lydia or Margaret? If I cared, even remotely, I would remember, thought Rachel, finally excusing herself and setting off in search of a bar. In the wake of a fall semester filled with unprecedented incidents of bad press for the university, a Pulitzer-winning literature professor accused of plagiarism, the discovery of rampant cocaine use in a mostly freshman dorm, the appearance of swastikas in the bathrooms of Butler Library on the day that the Israeli ambassador was scheduled to speak, a suicide on East Campus, President Holloway was eager to create good cheer, lift faculty morale, and demonstrate his return to the reins of power at the university. This pre-Christmas cocktail party was essentially a public relations maneuver, and a fairly transparent one at that. Despite the jovial atmosphere in the room, the tasteful string quartet in the corner, the mute cocktail waiters carrying trays of delicacies, the easy smiles and melodious laughter, the subtle flirtation, the flow of wine, and the admiring glances at the decor and architecture of the president's palatial home, cynical thoughts were being harbored by practically everyone in attendance. Now I'm just going to skip and read something that will help us start this conversation. All right. Remember, Rachel was going to look for the bar. She got there. Are you Mrs. Rosenzweig? Even before she heard his words, she felt his breath upon her neck and spun around. It was the young Indian man. He was standing nearly toe-to-toe with her. His gaze was presumptuous. Regal and haughty, he was at least 10 years her junior. Why do you ask? She asked coldly, but not without curiosity. The way he looked at you, like he owned you. Rachel crossed her arms. Marriage is not ownership, she informed the stranger. Digesting her words, the young man let his eyes roam freely over her small, compact form. Rachel started to feel enraged, uncrossed her arms, and placed them on her hips, shifting her weight. Do you share your husband's political views, he asked. No, Rachel replied hotly. What was this man after? She looked at him sharply, feeling the authority of her years, her status as the wife of a controversial professor. Who are you? Dismissing her question, the young man pressed on. Do you know that your husband has said that terrorist attacks against Jews are a legitimate form of resistance to Israel's occupation? He thrust a computer printout of an article into her hands. Rachel grabbed the article. It appeared to be a downloaded version of an article from the Financial Times. What the hell is this, she demanded. She had never seen this article. It will appear in tomorrow's paper, he said. Go home and read it. Your husband is quoted as saying he would feel no remorse if you or your daughter were killed in such an attack. Rachel tasted metal. Her blood pounded in her ears and her legs felt shaky. The cocktail party was in full swing in the room next door, and the noise was suddenly unbearable. "Are you all right?" the young man asked, not without compassion, putting his hand on her arm. His touch was hot. She felt it through her clothing. I'm going to censor this, what she really said. "Bug off," Rachel said, with sudden vehemence, throwing off his arm, striding toward the elevator, through the room where President Holloway was happily holding forth, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break with the dawn of the new day.
Wow. So Columbia obviously is such a central part of your life. You graduated from Columbia Journalism School. Your husband is a professor at Columbia. It features clearly and transparently in this fictitious account. What was you alluded to this, but what was the significant event that took place that this story is kind of built around, or was it? You said you didn't have a crystal ball, so otherwise I was going to ask you if you had a crystal ball, but clearly you don't. So what was the kind of the real life event that this alludes to, if you might share that?
Sure. All right. So there was an event, and the event was an address by Daniel Barenboim, the famous composer, conductor, at Miller Theater at Columbia. Some of you may be familiar with Miller. It's a beautiful space. It's on Broadway and 116th Street. Barenboim was scheduled to give a talk on performing Wagner in Israel. Great topic. Wagner, Hitler's favorite composer, right? It is, to say that it's a controversial musical choice for Israel is an understatement. And Ari and I said, we're in. Let's go and hear this. That did not happen. What happened was Barenboim, and I actually looked up coverage of this. The New York Times, Dan Wakin wrote about it, and also JTA, Jewish Telegraphic Agency, wrote about it. I called the reporter. Basically, what happened was a complete screed. It was almost embarrassing against Israelis and against Jews. And it was difficult to tell where Israeli ended and Jew began. And the dialogue, what I have Elisha Rosenzweig saying, is ripped from I would say headlines ripped from this event. And what struck me was not just that this was taking place, was not just that he was so triggered by the opportunity to stand and talk about Israel, so that he went down this particular path. But what happened in the audience, which was that people were on their feet applauding, screaming "Free Palestine," and then President Lee Bollinger, who I called Holloway, which is weird because I think the provost now is Holloway, and that's prophetic. That's a total accident. I'm beginning to wonder about me, of course, at this moment. The applause that he got was remarkable. We called Lee Bollinger, and he admitted that it was a terrible error in judgment, and it was horrible what happened, and he was going to open up an inquiry into it, and guess what happened? I also forgot but remembered when I read the article. Ari, I don't know if you remember this. You asked a question critical of Barenboim, and you got booed. And it was stunning. And, this scenario, we were shaken. It was the first time until October 8th of last year, when everything erupted on the campus and in other places, that I felt that sense, that jolt of shock. And I will say that something did happen a year earlier, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. A group of students at Columbia started bringing complaints against professors, faculty from a department that's no longer called MELAC, but was called MELAC. And help me out, I think it's Middle East language, Asian languages and cultures. And among these professors, Rashid Khalidi, Hamid Dabashi, And Joseph Mossad, who's in the news again, which we'll talk about, because breaking news, Mossad is now going to teach a course on Zionism, and he praised the attacks of October 7th. And maybe at the end, if you want, and we have time, I can read you the statement that the Columbia Press Office gave me. I told them I was going to be doing this event tonight. And I said, so, a lot of people are quite upset about this. And they said, oh, yes, we will send you the statement. And it reads like it was written by Monty Python, The Onion, I don't know, Jon Stewart in his more charitable to Israel phase. I don't know if he had that. So anyway, it was the students who were who then put together a documentary based on this, Columbia Unbecoming. I tuned in to what they were saying. I spoke with them. We met with them. I heard them out. And I'm going to make a confession. I believe them. There was no question. My error was that I thought they were describing something that was small and fringe and isolated and not capable of catching on. And frankly, I viewed a number of things that were going on at that time through the same lens. So for instance, we were receiving information about madrasas that were teaching anti-Semitic lessons. And I thought, okay, I'm sure this is happening in 5 madrasas, and I miscalculated. And so I will just say this, when I wrote this story, I didn't say, oh yes, I foresee that this is going to happen. Entirely the opposite. This was a flight of fancy. And I worried that the story was unrealistic. There are things that I made up that were not being said back then, that the characters have said in the course of this. For instance, this idea about violence being a form of legitimate resistance, that was not really being articulated out loud in mainstream circles, and it now, of course, is. So,
I mean, political violence against civilians was already a tool, but it wasn't yet. You wouldn't find it, circulating amongst in all. It was a fringe, let's say, a fringe assumption. Fanon and others who said it was kind of if there's a colonialist enterprise, but here that wasn't. It hadn't quite reached its fullness as it did in this last year. But I want to just take a step back for a second because I feel like I really want to talk about Jerusalem Lover, but I just wanted to say, first of all, you're a great writer.
Thank you.
And your sentences and the way that they were formed in your imagination and your descriptive powers are really evocative, and you really paint a picture so beautifully and richly. And I want to come back into Jerusalem Lover and back right into the heart of the piece. But can you just share with us we're here to talk about the book also, not just the idea, but what moved you to feel that you wanted to put together these 5, long pieces, these novella, and what did it feel like for you to write this book? What was moving you to write this?
So thank you for that.
I wanted to go off script because I'm thinking
I love it. I love it.
I'm so curious.
No. It's a great question. And, here too, I will say that there was something prescient. Although, again, I say it now because, and unconscious. And it's interesting, where does creativity come from? Is it from here, the thing that we know and we're intellectually thinking? Does anybody know? Is there an answer? Where does creativity lodge? So the stories were written over the course of probably 12 years. Oh, wow. And I'm somebody like a lot of writers. I was primarily doing public relations, and I was doing a lot of op-ed writing, and I was writing for my clients, and I was doing fiction for myself. Now, it wasn't that I just thought, oh, this is just for me and nobody can see it. Of course, I got myself an agent at some point, and the agent was wonderful and devoted, and the book almost sold several times. And then life just happened. I went to graduate school. Oh, I had written 4 of the stories. That's what it was. I wrote 4 of the stories: Lolita at Leonard's of Great Neck, Persephone's Palace, the Museum of Eroticism, and 2 writers. And then in graduate school, I was at Columbia J School, 2010, 2011. all of a sudden, this story, The Jerusalem Lover, wrote itself probably while I was supposed to be doing my thesis. You know how that goes. All of a sudden, you're inspired. Wow, what if I write about this? And I will say what's prescient about this collection that I only see now, and here I'm going to quote Franklin Foer, who had the famous front page, cover story for The Atlantic several months ago. Is this the end of the golden era of American Jewish life? Have we reached the end? Well, this book encapsulates these stories, even The Jerusalem Lover, although The Jerusalem Lover is the segue out of the golden era. But everything in this story, in this collection, depicts, the freedom to lose oneself in the stuff of life and not worry about things like survival, anti-Semitism, things that are, I guess, are we the same generation? Yeah, I think so. Ish.
Yeah, we're ish.
Never, ever, ever, I will say until last year, at the age of 63, I never had anything anti-Semitic happen to me, ever, 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 nowhere I went. And maybe I didn't notice, but there it is. I'm going to credit my son Judah with how this book got published, and I don't even know if you know this story. So Judah had a gig in February of 2023 at the Shrine in Harlem. The Shrine is a really awesome venue, music venue.
Yeah.
Okay? So Judah, it was an amazing performance, and I seem to remember, Judah, do I have this right? You were getting over the flu? And it was one of those things, when you're pushing yourself through, and because of that, it's like we were sitting thinking we're going to call an ambulance any second, and it was this great performance. And one of the people who showed up was Judah's English teacher from SAR High School, Marshall Messer. And he's a musician.
Yeah.
And, we're talking at the end of the show all about Judah. Oh, he's great because they used to jam in high school at Chagigas. And all of a sudden, Marshall says to me, hey, Shira, did you ever get those stories published? And I said, I'm sorry, what? How? I was like, what? How do you? Nobody knows about these stories except for my literary agent and a few people in my life. And he looked really stuck. He said, am I in trouble? I said, no, but you better tell me. So he's friendly with my agent, Ann Adelstein. And when the book did not sell, she called him evidently and said, am I nuts? I really love these stories. Would you mind reading them and telling me if my taste is off? And he told me, I read the stories and said, I love them. They're going to get published someday. And so I went home. So I'm standing there, at the Shrine. And all of a sudden, I think, ooh, I had enough distance from my own work. I went home. I said to my husband, don't talk to me for about 36 hours. And I holed myself in my office, which is my daughter's old bedroom. Anyone in Manhattan knows how this works. And I was like a lunatic of no sleep, no food, reading my stories and saying, this is it, I'm getting this published. Yeah. So that's how it happened.
Yeah. Thanks to Michael Messer, to Professor Marshall Messer. Amazing. Yeah. So let's come back to Jerusalem Lover, because I really thank you for the little excursus into the creative process, and also you're honoring that in you and also bringing forth this book. And I think where I wanted to go in the story before we went back to go forward is I'm really struck by Elisha's character and by, obviously it's based on Barenboim in a certain way, right? But in your mind, when you connect this to Franklin Foer, because I was thinking a lot about this, about the demise or the end of the golden era of American Jewish life, it's ironic because, of course, in real life, it was an Israeli who was an anti-Zionist, or an Israeli who was calling out, right? And here it's, Elisha, but is it that you were trying to create the ultimate end of liberalism as represented by American, or let's say Israeli, like American Western values, or let's say Western values, as embraced by the intellectual elites and the Tel Avivniks of Israel and the musicians and so on, that it's ultimately will become a betrayal of the identity that we don't have to focus on, that ultimately it bleeds into a kind of willingness to transcend tribalism almost always winds up being, we're going to be anti-tribal, and even if it means hurting ourselves, and even if it means throwing ourselves under the bus, kind of like the fawning sermon that I gave this year. Is that like, when I was feeling like, when Barenboim was talking about this, and reading the New York Times pieces, and then reading Alicia, like, he's a caricature of that, right? He's really, his wife, his kid doesn't matter. Like, he's kind of, he winds up betraying his own flesh and blood, as it were, and willing to throw them underneath the suicide bus, literally. Is that where, like, is that where you were sensing kind of a Jewish hatred, a kind of double standardism? What was going on for you? It's a long question, but
it's a great question, and I'll tell you, I have an answer.
I'm sure you do.
So here's the thing, my dad, Alava Shalom, who died 4 years ago, who was a rabbi and a clinical psychologist, when we weren't arguing over the fact that he would watch Fox News a lot when he came back from the Young Israel, and I would have to deprogram him and get him to watch other things, when we weren't having those arguments, we were colluding on a theory of Jewish anti-Zionism. And what occurred to me, because I did deep listening, and I did deep listening to Barenboim, but he wasn't the only one. What occurred to me, and I will just plot spoiler, what do I believe? And here I'm practicing psychology without a license. I do believe there's an element of pathology in what I'm going to call fabrent, meaning passionate Jewish anti-Zionism. When you are a Jew and your religion is anti-Zionism and you are proclaiming things like Elisha Rosenzweig, who really is a stand-in for others, that you're so ideologically committed that you're willing to sacrifice your kin and it's really yourself. You're really, then this is pathology. And I got up 2 nights ago, I was at an event. There was a conversation on the Upper West Side, one of many that has been taking place in private homes. And the tenor is, I'm going to say, problematic for me, because it feels to me very self-flagellating. And I got up finally. I'm not a restrained person. I know you're very surprised to hear this, but I did get up. There was room for one more question, and I got up and I said, so I'm not going to make any friends right now. I'm going to say I'm a tribal Jew. And I don't have a problem being for my people first. It's not that we're always right. It's not that we're above criticism. There are certain leaders, let's say prime ministers in office, that I'm staunchly opposed to right now. But in terms of Israel, Israelis, what are you talking about? Why are we engaging in this? It's Stockholm Syndrome. And I have to say, I think I shocked a lot of people. And I did share with you, somebody who's a rather prominent person texted me afterwards to tell me how much she supported me. And you said, why didn't she say anything? And I was like, I know. So I don't know why I'm the big mouth, but I am. And I think it was because I so believe, and I gave a backstory to Alicia. And this is not a plot spoiler. I'm not going to tell you everything, but I will say, my dad and I worked something out where, and again, he was the clinical psychologist, that there's an element of projection when a Jewish anti-Zionist is so driven in his anti-Zionism, and you begin to really do a close listening to what he's saying. It's not a critique of Israel, it's a wholesale demonization. And when that happens, I'm like, daddy issues, maybe mommy issues, something personal that's being projected. So that was Jewish shame, or what you had said, and I was very affected by your Kol Nidre speech on reactions to trauma, flight, fight, freeze, and fawn, which I admit I had never known, to fawn over the larger, scarier. You use the analogy of your dog, which is great. You immediately see the little dog lying on their back, showing their belly, saying, don't attack me, I'm not gonna hurt you, you're so big and strong. And I think that I agree with you that there is an element So I don't know if if it's the same thing, just in different words, critique of liberalism. Because here's the thing, I still feel I'm liberal. I just feel I'm anti-BS. And, someone said to me the other day, thank you, someone said to me, oh, Shira, you've moved to the right. I was like, no, this is not right. This is not left. It's kind of right and wrong. But so that's kind of how does that answer?
Yeah, I think that, yes. I mean, I think that, it's a complicated conversation. I think that I was having, I think a lot of these conversations are happening privately, and I was sharing with a member of our community who had been struggling with many of my positions over the last year, and also felt that I also had become, as you said, right, a little bit more to the right. And I was sitting with him, was doing a thought experiment with me about various things, and I said, the truth is that I feel as though that if you're somebody who really believes in liberalism and believes in human rights, and you also recognize and you have no problem with the thought experiment or even the assertion that, of course, Israel, like any nation, can be guilty of things, of course. Like, it feels as though every element of nuance has become so dangerously weaponized that one can't really have an honest conversation and name when people are applying double standards, or when they're using sloppy logic, or when their hearts are, of course, just like ours, but then they take the next step, right? So there are so many things that are happening in these spaces that feel, difficult to be in those conversations or to raise those things. And the thing that scares me the most is the kind of silence of, like that room where everybody, like your prominent friend, is thinking, you know what, I don't agree with all of this, and I just don't want to make a mess right now. And that kind of silencing of, oh, I don't want to, trouble the waters, that compounded. So in the story, you could see it, the insipid beginnings of it, but and you thought it was isolated, and you were led to believe, or we were led to believe, like, oh, it's just going to be one little piece. But meanwhile, it was deeper, and we continued to say, it's not such a big deal. And if you raised it up, it would become an alarmist. So I imagine that at the time, you guys were considered alarmists, or considered to be, I don't know, why are you making a big deal about it, right? Everybody knows Barenboim, that's the way he is, or that kind of thing. And so I identify so deeply with that. I feel like we give a pass to people often in the liberal world. Like, the sin in the liberal world is tribalism, right? If you are tribal, you are guilty of a lack of self-awareness. You're just you're a team, you're a fan, you're a fanatic. And so we Jews who want to belong, we show that we're anti-tribal. We just, we're the first ones to self-flagellate. Look at us, we're so aware, right? Look at us. We can be critical of our own PM, we can be critical, right? Very rarely in the last 13 months or 15 months have you heard a Palestinian representative on a major news outlet saying, let's first and foremost blame Hamas. Let's first and foremost blame our leadership. Let's first and foremost, before we start pointing fingers in any direction, right, let's look at our own. But you'll have as a Jews, and this is kind of the phenomena of as a Jew, right? As a Jew, like Barenboim and Alicia here are as a Jew, right? And so this betrayal, it feels like you really created something that we've observed over the last, year in a way that it's striking to compare, these two realities of your story, and yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. I want to ask you, so maybe also, if anybody, like queuing people up here, we have about, we're coming in for a landing, and then we'll have about, some questions or some comments, or people want to have a conversation.
Right, and we do have one last song from Judah before,
and we have a last song.
Before the Q&As.
Before the Q&A.
What do you think? After Q&A? What do we see? I guess we'll go with it.
And the evening with the song. Okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So what's been the feedback from you, for those who have read the book, like in your circles, people have read the book, and what kind of feedback?
I'm laughing because I just had this conversation today where this is a common thing. Did you have a second part of the question?
No,
I'm
just laughing.
Have you read any of the other stories?
Yeah, I've read the other. My wife also.
Yeah. So some of them deal with sex. So the funniest, I have had really hilarious reactions. I've had sophisticated reactions. Somebody called me today who was crying because of the story Persephone's Palace. Okay, I'll just say it's the second story. It's about an 18-year-old girl who is in full-on rebellion mode against her parents. She lives in Queens. Know any 18-year-old girls in rebellion mode against her parents? And she's Jewish. Of course, they're all Jewish. It's a Jewish book. She's in a diner on Queens Boulevard, and she's just had this disgraced summer, meaning it was the best summer of her life, and she's totally in the doghouse, and she's with her goody two-shoes cousin who's supposed to set her straight, and she meets this German businessman, and he gives her his card, and he's staying at the New York Hilton. And I will say, that part actually happened to me. The rest of the story, so these stories have sparks. The rest of the story is entirely a work of fiction. But what commonly happens is people assume, this is my diary. God forbid I could, all this stuff, the juicy, the immoral, whatever it is. Nebuch, I can't, I just had to find some channel. So I had to just put it out there, so I pretended it's fiction. No, these are works of fiction. And in fact, Jane, I don't know if when we spoke, this is my friend Jane Mushabak, also a novelist. We did something in Great Neck. The moderator kept on referring to my characters as Shira, you. I was like, okay, the character Rebecca, that's not me. I did not make out with my teacher. She made out with her teacher. But it's very interesting. I think that there is, because the stories I've been told are kind of evocative of a time and place, and have a lot of details, people assume, oh my God, this is Shira's life. And so there are departures. There's definitely inspiration, and I have fun. I was up in Maine this summer talking about the book, and I said, okay, let me just map out some of the stories. And I looked out. Everyone looked so eager. I was scared because they had all read the stories. They're like, they wanted to know. So I said, okay, guys, like, has everyone here lived lives? And so I will say,
For professional use, like a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Don't read this unless you're able to,
right. Imagine. So I'll tell you a cute story, okay? So my mom, Rochelle, is almost 91. She lives in Great Neck. And until her eyesight started going bad, she drove every week to the Great Neck Public Library, returned with a stack of books, returned it the next week, amazingly. I'm trying to get her used to audiobooks. It's not going so well. So I did a reading in her kitchen of Lolita. So I'll just tell you, the story Lolita is set in 1974. Do I have to describe Leonard's of Great Neck? Okay, the famous...
I also grew up in Great Neck. We have a couple of Great Neck people here. So
Great Neck people. I saw a bat mitzvah picture that you can share afterwards in the audience from Leonard's, 1973. Amazing. Mm-hmm. So I said to my mom, I'm going to do a reading. And she said, oh, good. And so I read her the story, and it has the word Lolita in it. So it involves a young girl. She's 13 in the story. And in this case, it's a reverse Lolita. She has an object of desire, and the object of her desire is her math teacher, Mr. Miller. And he's at this bar mitzvah, and they end up on the roof, and that's all I'm going to say. So my mother is sitting at the edge of her chair. I did eliminate, I edited a bit while I read. It's not gross. Don't worry. You're not going to be like, how could you write this? I will say Mr. Miller might be disciplined today, but it's truly not gross. It's more, I think, romantic. And my publisher, I want to say a word. Adam Bello is my publisher. If his last name is familiar, yes, that's his dad. And he is the publisher of Wicked Sun and Post Hill Press. And he has been the advocate every time I had a question. Should I keep this in? His was a staunch yes. And he made me feel scared that I even raised it. I also have some problematic language, okay? And the person who called me crying about Persephone's Palace, and I'll get to that in a second, it's probably the most emotional story in the collection, the story about the girl who meets the German guy in the diner. It doesn't end well. I'm not going to say, I'll just leave that tantalizing detail for you. The person who called me today had a question about some of the language between her tears. And so I use language that was used commonly by school children in the 70s. And if anyone was a school child here in the 70s, or even I'd say a school child up until probably the 90s, you know that there are words we don't use anymore. They're not nice. It's not the PC police. They're wrong. They're bad. They're insulting to people based on the way someone looks or whatever. But that's the way we spoke. And so it was authentic to these school children, and I have it in the preface to the book. And I'll tell you, I watched so I have 3 grandkids. They're now 5, 3, and 1. And when I was watching Dumbo, it's a very good exercise to watch the old Disney films made before, let's say, now. Any of them that have racist stereotypes, like the crows in Dumbo or the Siamese cats in Lady and the Tramp. They are horrifically racist, but it's also of that era. Disney made a decision. It did not remove it. It has a disclaimer at the beginning. And when I saw Dumbo, I was watching Dumbo with my 2 oldest grandkids a couple of years ago, and I saw that. I said, that's what I'm going to do. Say, for artistic integrity, I'm keeping this in, and I'm keeping these situations in that are not okay today. We know they're not okay. I think things were loosey-goosey. I think parents also didn't know, right? When you were a teenager, did your parents really know what you were doing? No. Judah, I don't know if I knew everything you were doing, but I think
no
we
phones
were,
and no
Snapchat,
we were, no tiles.
My God. I mean, the crazy, insane things that happened in that era. Yes.
Yeah, hours. So I just whenever, like, reading the book and then also knowing you, Shira, as long as I know, I was just gonna ask one little personal question, but like, you know, I know that it's cool. Having grown up also the daughter of a rabbi, like, you know, and there's something transgressive about your book, right? And subversive, right? And there's something about your personality that, I don't know, I feel as though, we were talking about this a little bit today, that like a willingness to say the thing that won't win you, like you're almost like an anti-fawning, like that whole fawning sermon won't land on someone who relishes in being contra for the sake of something that needs to be born, or something that needs to be said, or something needs to be spoken into a space, right? So okay, if everybody will think that it's too erotic, you don't care because it's your artistic truth. And if you're at a parlor meeting and people are all like fawningly nodding their heads as some pablum about something is being spoken, you have to stand up and say, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to make friends." But is your artistic, part of your artistic impulse feels like speaking a truth and being like that kind of power. And I was also taken by that in terms of the women, like feminine archetypes here, and like all the different very powerful women in different ways. Like I was just thinking about, do you feel almost like one of your pieces in the world is a daemon, like the thing that you're drawn to do in the world is to speak the truth, even no matter what, even if it's because it's artistic integrity, it's your soul's integrity, like you have to speak it. I'm wondering.
Exactly. No, you nailed it. That is bidiyuk, like exactly. Bidiyuk is Hebrew for exactly. It is deep, and I think it is. You got it. It's soul and it's artistic. And there's someone in this room, namely my husband, who knows that the thing I hate the most is to be shut up, right? I have to speak. And I am a truth teller, and sometimes I feel I'm a radical truth teller. And by the way, I'm not always right, you know, and I'm happy to say I called this wrong, right? But this is how I called it, and I think it is something in me, and I think it's something I got from my dad, my Abba, and he was a supreme truth teller. Gave unbelievable sermons like your fawning sermon, you know, which really, you know, shook the rafters and made people think and pay attention and consider their souls. And I'll say one other thing, because this brings it full circle in the Romamu family. So 3 weeks ago, I had breakfast in Harlem with the wonderful Rabbi Jill Hammer. Okay, I don't know if anyone here is familiar. Jill is a treasure. She's almost not of this world. She's like an ethereal, brilliant rabbi, writer, spiritual guide, teacher, all the above. And she has a new book coming out called Moonstone Covenant. I know that her book event is going to be, I think it's January 4th or so at Romomo. I think Judah might be playing. Come, everyone should register. Jill and I promoting her, but she's amazing. So we had this breakfast at Sylvana's.
Book. It's like her. She's
Right. But it's kind of the Jewish Narnia, very, very subtle Jewish Narnia. And so Jill and I are talking, and this was the craziest thing in the world. We're just like, I'm giving her some ideas, and we're sharing. She's telling me what she's done and where she's hitting a wall. And I know her publisher, Ian Press. I'm working with Ian on Ruth Messenger's biography, little plug for Ian Press. And all of a sudden, we're talking about creativity. And I just mused out loud. I said, I think part of my creativity stems from the fact that I'm adopted. I'm an adopted child. I'm an adopted person. And Jill almost drops her shakshuka. And she stares at me, and I'm like, oh, my God, I shouldn't have said that. Maybe that's too... And she said, I'm adopted, too. Did you know? Okay, cry laughing? We were the insane two people at Sylvana's, cry laughing, screaming, screeching. We looked demented, and we're just like, we need to think about this. And by the way, Elisa, this was the day I saw you at the amazing Robert, the restaurant on the top of the Museum of Art and Design in Columbus Circle, which everyone has to go to. But it was magic and creativity.
Because they're on the outside.
Yes.
Certain sense of,
And what if? And then we started talking about Moshe, the character of Moshe, an adoptee, Superman, an adoptee, Tarzan, and the what ifs and the need and feeling ourselves belonging nowhere and everywhere and kind of floating above and watching. So, yeah.
Well, you definitely, in the Jerusalem Lover, you definitely spoke truth, and you were prescient and prophetic, and it's really remarkable given what's now happening, right, in the aftermath of everything, what's going on still. We said we were going to come back to Mossad and to what's going on with at Columbia right now. I mean, do you want to speak to that at this moment and kind of where things are with this semester? I know that Lawrence Rosenblatt resigned, right, when Joseph Mossad was being slated to teach a course on Zionism. Is that really happening? Is Joseph Mossad teaching a course on Zionism at Columbia University? Is it shocking? I mean, should it be shocking? Of course we should be shocked, but maybe not at this point.
It is as if a Klansman were teaching a course on Black history. It's bizarre. What do you say about it? And Columbia's statement.
What's their statement? Yeah.
You want me to? I'll look it up. Okay.
What's their statement? We need to, for the viewers and for posterity here at the archives of 92NY, we need to have this statement.
I was amazed they actually got back to me. Columbia. Let me spell Columbia. Millie Wirt. Okay. She's been sending me her statements. Millie Wirt. I can give you her email address if you want to contact her. Okay, statement on Professor Mossad's Spring 2025 course. Professor Mossad's statements following the terrorist attack on October 7th created pain for many in our community. That's the headline. Here it goes. Professor Mossad's statements following the terrorist attack on October 7th created pain for many in our community and contributed to the deep controversy on our campus. We have consistently condemned any celebration or promotion of violence or terror. We remain committed to principles of free expression and the open exchange of viewpoints and perspectives through opportunities for constructive dialogue and understanding throughout our campus community, and we seek to provide a learning environment and classrooms that promote intellectual inquiry and analytical thinking along with civility, tolerance, and respect. That was like the longest run-on sentence. Okay. Next, Professor Mossad's class is one of 3 courses Columbia students can elect to take next semester on the subject of Zionism and the history of Israel, 2 of which are offered through Columbia's Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies. Professor Massad's class is limited to 60 students and is not a required course. And there you have it. So it's okay.
I guess if anything is prefaced with a preamble like that one, then you might then whatever comes next, I guess is, I don't know, that's crazy. And so tell us about, so Lawrence Rosenblatt resigned?
Yeah, so Lawrence Rosenblatt resigned. Various faculty members, including everyone knows Shai Davidai, are organizing. I'm sure members of this room belong to one of the many WhatsApp groups of Columbia alum, right? Parents of Columbia students, et cetera. They're organizing, they're petitioning. There are elected officials who, of course, have spoken out against this because it's certifiably crazy.
It's absurd. Yeah.
That's the whole thing. And by the way, my last article for the Media Line was about this charming publication that appeared 2 weeks ago, the Columbia Intifada. Did you see this?
Oh, no.
So this was amazing. I mean, it basically is, if you read it, it's kind of downloaded propaganda and ridiculous. I mean, there's even a craft column on how to make your own wheat paste to hang up anti-Israel posters. Like, we're so folksy, you know. We can. It's like summer camp for
Like the
terrorists.
Jewish catalog, yeah.
Yeah, the Jewish catalog.
Like the Intifada catalog.
And what you said, and picking up on the fact that people are afraid to speak out.
Yeah.
I wrote to many professors, especially at the School of Journalism, from which I'm an alum, and Ari is now a recently retired full-time faculty member and adjunct. And I heard from many people who evidently think that what's happening is horrible, but they can't say anything. Fun fact, yes, free speech.
Seriously?
So it's amazing who is free to speak and not. I did track down Mark Rudd. Does everyone remember Mark Rudd from SDS? The great radical. He's around, he's alive, and he's Jewish. Evidently, the students last year had a meeting with him, and they tried to sit at the feet of Mark Rudd and have him give his bracha to what they're doing. And he said, "You're all a bunch of idiots. Why are you turning on your fellow students like this? We never did this in '68." And, you know, there's a lot of also like bizarre hearkening to 1968 and pretending this is remotely like what happened with the students. I tracked down a wonderful filmmaker who did I can't quote him by name, Jewish guy, British Jew, who did a documentary about the student uprisings. Also, he can't talk to me on the record. People, I have spoken to so many people who cannot talk to me on the record.
So I had a conversation today with a lawyer here in New York who has been representing students from NYU, students from Harvard, from Brown, and from Penn. And he actually represented my niece, Bella Ingber, was a plaintiff down at NYU. She was harassed, and she was physically harassed by someone in the library, and they brought a lawsuit against NYU, and they settled. And now he's working on these other 3 campuses. But he was saying, and he was extremely clear, that the things that you depict from, that were isolated, that the depiction of like an isolated or, a complacency that kind of arose because, this isn't, once this is done, it'll be over. It won't continue, it won't gather steam, it won't grow. Like, he's really concerned that right now that's happening, that there's a kind of tempering, like, because the protests are not nearly what they were last year, and like some of the same seeds and some of the same problems that are depicted in Jerusalem Lover and in this experience for you are still there. So are you worried about that? And what do you think we should be doing about it?
Absolutely. I mean, while I was trying to get from the West Side here, I met one of our neighbors, and he was on his way to a community meeting because, you may know, the campus is closed to everybody except for students, faculty, staff, and administration. My alumni card doesn't work. Ari has been doing some shenanigans, so I have this, I can scan this thing going through. It takes like 25 minutes for them to properly identify me, at which point I'm like, I'll just go around 114th Street. But this is not a solution. putting hired allied security dudes on every square inch of the campus so that the students can't pop up a tent, an REI tent, or closing the campus to humans like us who are not going to protest or do anything like that, doesn't get, it's like the doctor, the patient coming in with a horrific infection and the doctor treating something external but not the infection. And so I think that that's what interim President Armstrong has done. And I really don't buy into the praise. I've heard a lot of praise about how wonderful she is. She's not wonderful. She's not as bad as Manu Shafiq. Manu Shafiq was a disaster, and she resigned 2 weeks before the start of the semester. And so I feel a lot of stuff is happening, and I feel that it's very volatile, and it feels to me, we live on 116th in Amsterdam. Some people may have been following my live streams last year. So I live streamed a lot of stuff. I was on the campus the night Hamilton was invaded. Somehow when I put a hoodie on, I looked like a college student. And once famously, I took one of Judah's amps, and this was my shining moment. I blasted Israeli music over the protesters. Yes! And the cops came, but that's a whole other story. I denied everything. I didn't even deny, I just deflected and offered them coffee and tea. But I feel that there is, it's leaching into other areas. So for instance, I saw something yesterday that just, I could not believe it. It was a tweet from a therapist who had the Palestinian flag, some other flags, a million flags after her name. And she said, it is a shame that so many in our healing therapeutic community are Zionists. So many of us are feeling unsafe seeing therapists who are Zionists. And I'm like, this is the litmus test now? Like, do you know?
The criminalizing of that word.
You're criminalizing. Yeah. Do you know where they shop? I mean, come on.
Honestly. My sister lives in Tel Aviv, and she's here because our family has a wedding on Sunday. And she told me that she was in like a store on Fifth Avenue or something, and someone asked her where she was from, where she lives, and she thought for a moment about whether or not to say that she was from Israel, but she said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to say it. And she said it, and the two salespeople said, like, oh, we love Israel. And it was like, it made her cry. It made her cry. It could have gone the other way, but like, so we're gonna just come in for a little landing here. You know, are there any questions or comments? Then we're going to finish with a song, and the book is available here as well for those. But we'll take a couple of questions in a row, and if just move around. Yeah.
Okay. So, question? Oh, do you have a question? Yes. Oh, good.
First of all, thank you for being a fellow RBM resident Big Mouth, and we need more. And you really give me, you inspire me to be that voice. And I kept thinking, it's really more of a comment before you even said it, Rabbi David, about the fawning. That rocked my world. That sermon has profoundly impacted. And I think what I say to my friends who are Jewish and not, I'm less scared of the people who go into Charlottesville and say, Jews will not replace. I mean, I'm scared of them, but more than kind of our own people who are like watering down, I call it whitewashing anti-Semitism. I want to write a piece for the Forward on that. And I've been trying to really lovingly, when it happens, call out my friends and say, with all due respect, I believe you're being complicit with anti-Semitism, because it wasn't, like they always say, it didn't start with the gas chambers, and I think more and more it's so important in what I call beautifully honest ways that we have to call out.
Yeah.
And what is wrong with tribalism? I mean, we're connected to a tribe. Yeah. I mean, this whole thing of just weaponizing, Zionism. So I think your story is really important. And I had a locksmith come to my apartment, and there was a silence. I said, "Where are you from?" And big silence. And he goes, "Israel." And I said, "Yofi, Yofi." And
Great.
He said, I like your jewelry. So it's like,
fair.
I saw the hesitation. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're fair. We have time for actually one more comment or question,
Okay.
and then we're going to really end with a song.
As a Columbia alumnus, I really resonate with a lot of the comments that you've made. I think that your predictions about the future are equally prescient. For those who did not see the front page of that publication, the Columbia Intifada, the headline reads, "Zionist peace means Palestinian blood." And so my question for you, in this spirit of speaking out and speaking proud, is there a good pivot, a conceptia of sort that we could use to try to powerfully speak back in a simple way, the kind of like a catchy thing that will disarm the people that are adding fuel to the fire?
I think everybody's working on, people have been saying all year that we don't have catchy slogans, they're not easy to remember, and right. I think that a lot of PR firms are working on it. Like I know Archie Gottesman is constantly trying to find ways to publicly and proudly bring awareness. I don't know. I haven't found if there's one way. I don't know if you have.
Music. I mean it.
Yeah.
Not just blasting. I really think that we should have mobile sound systems and just drown out the hate with Am Yisrael Chai and Hallelujah and everything. And throw in some Kate Smith. They really love that. God bless America.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know. I think we have to continue speaking out. I think we have to publish. I think we have to do what Jews do, create and fight. Okay.
Should I say one quick thing?
A quickie.
Okay, I was at an Upper West Side book group that we gotten together, many times over 20 years. And I sensed that we're a very mixed group, Jewish, non-Jewish, white, black, etc. And something made me say, at this last meeting, I just have to tell you, if you want to boycott me, I just had 4 short stories published in Israel, and we know how many authors have decided to boycott. And I don't know why I said it, but it prompted someone else at the book group to go into a pro-Israel speech. And it was, maybe we have to be willing to do what you do, which is provoke. And I just did it impulsively, but we had a great conversation, which, some of the pro-Palestinian garbage just came out. It was like a teach-in. And I asked, how many of you have had Holocaust victims in your family? And the hands went up. And the Jews who never would have said anything had to, because I offered people, you want to boycott me? I'm just telling you so you know. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Jane Moshe. Read her stuff. All right, so.
Yeah, Judah.
Judah. So we spoke about the problem of silence, right? So here's the antidote, speaking out. And here is the sound of silence.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left at seas while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless streams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People writing songs that voices never share. No one dare disturb the sound of silence. Fool, said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was for men. And the sign said the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and the tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence.